The EQ shows you everything from 20 hertz, which is the bottom of human hearing, all the way up to 20 kilohertz, which is the top. And we have several different types of curves available to us. At the top and the bottom, we have just basic roll-off curves, and that means that we're just rolling the top end off. That's what that guy does. And then here's another roll-off, rolling the bottom end off. That's what this guy does. So this would be considered a low-pass filter because it's passing everything that's lower than this point. This would be considered a high-pass filter because it's passing all the audio above this point. So we're passing the high end and rolling off the lows. It's a little counterintuitive. You can also think of it as a bass roll-off, but people refer to it as a high-pass filter. So that's what these two guys are. These are high-pass and low-pass roll-offs. The next type of curve is a shelf. And a shelf just raises something up and goes all the way out for infinity to the very bottom frequencies. So a shelf looks like this. And you can see if you look at this little icon here, there's your flat line, then it goes up and out. It looks just like this little line going up and out here. There is a shelf curve. A shelf is useful for turning up the low end or turning up the high end. I'm turning up the high end here with this high end shelf. I can drag it way back, but it still just turns up the high end. But what I really want you to cue in on are these 4 bell curves. These bell curves look like that. And it kind of looks like a bell, right? You can make these wider or more narrow. They can be a peak like that. For our purposes in trying to just learn frequencies, I would recommend that you be right around 1. You see this number right here, 1.00. As I drag this out, it gets smaller down to 0.14, and of course the curve gets bigger. As I drag it in, the number gets higher, but the curve gets more pointy. So like a 4 or a 5, we call this the Q number. A higher Q makes a more narrow curve. I'm suggesting that we keep this at 1, and then we can move this guy around, and we can turn him on and off, as well as drag him to the negative. Okay, so let's just try this out. We're going to play a little bit of the file, Mathematician, and I'm going to boost a few frequencies. Turn them on, turn them off, try to get used to what it sounds like compared to different frequencies. So just listen for a little bit. So I just compared 100 hertz to 200 hertz. I boosted 100, put it back to flat, boosted 200, put it back to flat. And so we want to start getting used to the idea of what does that do to the mix? What does 100 sound like when I boost it? What does 200 sound like when I boost it? And we can keep doing that. Logic has some interesting spots. They let you know where these are by just the numbers showing up. 500, 50, 100, 200, 500, 1K, 2K, 5K, 10K. And those are great places to start. Just go right to those numbers and see what they sound like. Let's go on up a little higher. little wah-wah guitar action going on there. That is the simplest demonstration of how you can go in and load any number of mixes and then an EQ and then start drilling yourself on these frequencies, trying to just train your ear as to what 100 sounds like, what 200 sounds like, and so on. And then, of course, eventually, you're going to want to get used to what cuts sound like as well. Let's listen to just a little bit of those. Now that's a little bit advanced. We're not going to test over cuts right away. We're going to test over boosts first, but we will eventually get to testing over cuts as well. And that can be really tricky because sometimes if I cut a low frequency, like if I were to do something like this, especially if it's wide, if I were to cut the low end, it's really easy to perceive that as being a boost up here in the high end. It's really easy for a low-end cut to sound like a high-end boost because relative to each other, it's the same thing that's happening. So you have to know where you're starting from. You have to really get your ears acclimated to where you began, where ground zero is, so to speak, the flat line, so that when someone makes a cut, you can hear that, yes, I am actually losing bottom end. I'm losing bottom end, not just gaining top end. So it gets pretty